Hello and welcome everybody to Flicker Effect and our spoiler-filled review of episodes 4 and 5 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm David Lotz. Joining me is Bobby Jackson. How's it going, Bobby?
It's going good. We only got one more episode left, so got two episodes to talk about tonight.
That's true. Yeah, we did a review. Those of you watching may have seen it. We did a review of the first 3 episodes. We didn't get a chance to do one just on 4, but yeah, after episode 5, we decided to jump on here and do a review of the last 2. Like you just said, we got one more left. Uh, Feels like such a quick season, or if you want to
Mm,
call it a season, I guess show. As of right now, it's a one-off kind of thing,
yeah,
as far as we know, unless you know something I don't. But
nothing yet. We haven't heard
yeah,
anything. Numbers were
yeah,
good, obviously, but we haven't heard anything about solidly getting a second season. Who knows? Maybe D23 they'll say something.
right, true. But yeah, again, this is gonna be a spoiler warning if you haven't watched Obi-Wan Kenobi episodes 4 and 5. So all the way through 5, caught up at this point, or at least when we're posting this. Um, then yeah, you might want to go watch those first before we
Definitely.
get into our review.
Spoiler,
Yeah,
as it says on the banner. So yeah.
spoilers for Obi-Wan Kenobi, minus episode 6, which isn't out yet. So we talked about 4 off air.
We
So at
did,
least
yeah.
I know what you think of 4. I have actually no idea what you think of episode 5. Uh, so I'm
This
very
is true.
curious. I'm gonna ask you right off the bat. I mean, what do you think of the show up to this point, 4 and 5? Your thoughts?
I guess up to this point, it's been uneven. There's a lot of issues, I think, in terms of the writing, where the story is. I didn't come into it with any specific preconceived notions of how I thought the story should go or would go. So I haven't really been let down in that aspect where I feel a little bit um feel a little bit lacking is that what they are telling us, if it doesn't feel fully fleshed out, and that it's been shortcutted in a lot of ways. Maybe it's because of the 30 minutes plus episodes, or just a short order count of episodes. Either way, it just doesn't feel like they delved enough into these characters to really give it the broadness and the epicness I think that it deserved. That being said, episode 4, I felt like it was, for me, it felt like filler. Just because it's sort of in the middle of the story where they're doing this breakout to try and get Leia free. Uh, I really felt like a lot of that could have been tacked on to episode 4, or episode 3, sorry. And so it seemed like it can have been condensed and tacked onto that and made as a longer episode, or just something different than what we got. It really felt like there wasn't any forward movement with the characters, like maybe an inch, but not enough to where I felt like I was satisfied after that episode. And ultimately, it was really just to get to the point where Leia was free, and then we tracked them to where they are, I think, in Jabim on this episode of episode 5. So, uh, going into episode 5, I think I had higher hopes that, knowing that there was only 2 episodes left, they had to start to deliver on some of these things that we have been expecting to a certain degree. That being that you'd get more between Vader and Obi-Wan, with it winding down really soon. So, and that did bear fruit in this episode. You got flashbacks with Anakin and Obi-Wan during the Clone Wars time. And so, this episode, I really felt like it gave me a lot more of what I wanted. Um, Mostly because I think it's because it's drawing to a close. They have to start tying up loose ends and tying up threads that they laid in the beginning of this show. So I think that that's what made this episode one of the stronger ones for me. And it was about the character that we were getting, and the effectiveness into which they used a lot of the character stuff that was going on in this episode. So um, from those points alone, I thought it really worked well. But then I think for the other aspect is just the cool factor of getting to see Vader do some of the things that he does in this particular episode. I think adds on top of it. For some people, I think that maybe that was the thing that they had been waiting for the most and looking forward to uh, this whole entire series. So I can imagine for their standpoint, this being the best because of that stuff. But for me, it was the best because we were getting payoffs to character stuff. And the stuff with Vader was just cool stuff. So I think that for me, this episode probably is the strongest right next to the first episode. And I'd have to rewatch that first episode and then watch this against it to see if I thought this one might be a little bit better. But they're really pretty much on par for me. And I think that's with one episode to go. Um, I'm hoping it's at least as good as this one was to me, which again I thought was really strong.
Um, yeah, episode 4 for me. I'm with you. Like the filler episode feeling you got from it is basically the same way I felt about it. I felt like, especially like I said, we talked about it off air. I enjoyed it, I think, a little more than you did,
Hmm.
but um, there's definitely issues with it. Do I like the fact that it's just a filler when we only have 6 episodes, and
Right.
not only that, but they're not even hour-long episodes, like you said. I don't know if you said just now the runtime of
Yeah.
that fourth episode, it was pretty relatively short. Um, which, yeah, again, I agree. It feels like it could have just been tacked on to the episode before it, and that would have worked. Um, it in a way it feels like it's filler, and then also like, hey, let's just give Star Wars fans more of what they know,
Mm.
which maybe some fans do want that. I've heard a lot of the comparisons to like episode 4 and going to save Leia from the Death Star, and I mean, yeah, it does have a lot of similarities to that plot
Yeah.
line, that small plot line from that movie. And yeah, that kind of stuff can get frustrating to me. There's definitely, I think, writing issues with that episode and just stuff that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, we could have definitely done an episode of this show just on episode 4 and talked about it probably for a while, and I could have gone on and on and on, and I think you could have as well with issues with that episode.
Yeah.
But we won't do that. I think we're going to end up just kind of concentrating more on episode 5 since we just saw it. But yeah, I think for the most part we're in the same boat on episode 4 of the show. Episode 5, I don't really feel like we're in the same boat. I actually didn't like episode 5 much at all. I, in a way, like I remember when you and I talked after episode 4, and you felt, I think, more strongly negative about it than I did.
Mm.
And then I watched this episode, and a lot of the things you were saying about that episode 4 is how I felt about this episode. like one, I just this isn't new to this episode, but it's just more of it, and some of it maybe a little worse. But I mean, I just don't think the show and this episode is shot well.
Mm.
Like there's just a lot of stuff where it just looks like it just doesn't look like Star Wars, and this kind of goes along with what we've talked about before with the look of the show in general and how it doesn't feel cinematic, and it does just feel like a TV show with
Hmm.
being a good looking TV show, but still, when we think about the Star Wars we know, and even some of the Star Wars TV we've gotten, I think if we think about some of the way Mandalorian has looked, I think Mandalorian, which also uses the volume quite a bit, for whatever reason, I feel like has found a way to make that show look incredibly good
Mm.
versus this show where there's just so many times where it feels like the volume it's so obvious that they're having to shoot that way. When I feel like the Mandalorian does it without it feeling so constrained. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that there's episodes, at least for me, where the volume stands out in The Mandalorian.
Hmm.
But I think for the most part, on this show and on The Mandalorian, um, I think some of that fades to the periphery for me, and I'm more in tune in what's going on with the characters. And so I don't sometimes catch some of it unless it's really obvious. So, and same with I've heard some people complain about the music or the lack of original score music from the series. And again, that's one of those things that I don't catch when I'm watching it because I'm not really hearing the music as much or not missing the Imperial March when Vader walks in and stuff like that. I'm just focusing on what's actually going on or what's being said. So I kind of miss some of that stuff. And I think some of that is the same when it comes to the way some of it is shot. Sometimes I definitely absolutely notice it. It's just it stands out, and it could be maybe because they're in one scene for a certain amount of time. So then that gives my eye a chance to sort of scope and scan everything, and then I kind of pick up on certain
Hmm.
things. But other times I don't really notice it, and so I think that for me, I think that the volume can be a bit of a crutch, as we're seeing that it's new tech and it saves them money. But I still I almost sometimes want to give it a pass because it is TV and it's not a movie. But then every time I get ready to give it a pass, I keep thinking about how um, Andor looks from that trailer.
Right.
And it's just like, well, that's going to be TV, but it looks cinematic in a way that Obi-Wan doesn't. So
Right.
it's hard to give it that pass.
Yeah. It's just I don't know. Like the first thing that comes to mind in this episode, like I mean, maybe it sounds silly, but like that, it's the scene of the stormtroopers all like getting this garrison getting ready, like right outside at the door,
Yeah,
so they
that's
can
one of
try
the
to
ones
get
I
in.
noticed.
And it was just like even just that whole setup of the shots of it, it just looked silly. It looked like it just looked bad. And then the whole battle, I don't think was shot particularly well. And then there's just even shots of dialogue that I just
Hmm.
it's not good in my opinion. Another thing that I think the writing is pretty bad in the show in general. There's a lot of stuff that I think we're supposed to just kind of like let go, and it just sticks out like a sore thumb to me. And the dialogue I don't think is particularly good. A lot of stuff in episode 4, and then in this episode as well. Like that just I don't know. That just really bugs me. I mean, hey, we get the Grand Inquisitor back, which we totally expected. And I
Right.
mean, maybe we'll get some more explanation in episode 6, but I mean, nothing as to like. I mean, to me, if you're going to act like you're killing somebody, even if all of us as Star Wars fans know there's no way he could be dead, still, if you're going to play that kind of game in your script and in your show, but then bring him back, I feel like it's bad writing and bad filmmaking to not at least someone somehow like give us some type of explanation as to how that happened. you know,
Hmm.
like just for him to just show up and hey, here I am, like that, and that's just one of many things
Hmm.
about this episode that bugged me.
Yeah, his explanation was
Yeah,
that hate can make you. I forget how he phrased it exactly, but something
right.
about how hate can. It's amazing what hate can make you accomplish, or something. But
Uh,
it kind of reminds me of the whole aspect of Darth Maul when he was cut in half and how he comes back and he was talking about he was fueled by hate and anger that kept him going, kept him alive, or something to that effect as well.
and then like I mean, since we're talking about that, and then the fact that we do the same kind of stab on Riva, And then it just made no sense to me that Darth Vader would just choose to leave her there, like undead. Like, it's a moment in the show where I'm just like, this makes zero sense to me. I I get maybe the perspective of it's not, almost like it's not worth his time. Like even that whole
Mm,
fight is a very like, she's not worth my time. Like I don't
right.
even pull my own lightsaber out. I'm only using her lightsaber. I'm toying with her.
Yeah.
But still, to just leave her there, just to walk away, and Grand Inquisitor gives her that line of, leaving you where we found you in the gutter
Hmm.
and everything. But I don't know. It still just felt convenient as a way to keep her in the show, and to keep her in the story. We're just not. I don't buy into as a viewer that they wouldn't have killed her. Like, just it doesn't work for me. Stuff like that just bugged me about the episode. I don't know. I watched this episode, and yeah, we talked about, it was like after episode 4, it was like, man, episodes 5 and 6 really need to deliver. Like basically they need to be the final 2 hours if they were going to be an hour long each, that would make this show worth it. And after episode 5, I'm going to say it, I've basically lost all hope in this show, man. Like maybe episode 6 will be great, and I really hope it is.
Mm.
I would be shocked if I watch episode 6 and I'm like, all right, there it is. That was what I was waiting for. I
Yeah.
mean, there has been nothing, basically. I shouldn't say nothing, but almost nothing to convince me that what they've decided to do in the making of this show was well planned, like
Mm.
well written. it, I can't see why episode 6 is going to be drastically any different, and unless for some reason they were just like, well, this is the budget, and we're going to spend 75% of it on episode 6 and 25% on the other 5 episodes. I mean, it would have to be some stupid, and if they did just decide to do that, that was just a terrible idea.
Yeah.
But at least in that case, maybe episode 6 would be great, but that's not what's happening here. Like,
I think
uh,
for me, because I did enjoy this episode, that 6 doesn't have to do a lot of heavy lifting for me, for it to still be me to consider it at least a enjoyable, good series. I think what 6 needs to do for me is take what we already have that's on the table and wrap it up in a satisfying way, and don't mess with anything that's canon. And so as long as it can do that for me, I think I'll be okay. Um, because like I said from the beginning, I didn't have specific expectations. And I know certain people who went into it thinking, okay, we're going to get a lot of flashbacks of Anakin and
right.
Obi-Wan, and there's going to be this whole story of him with Owen and on Tatooine. I didn't have any thoughts specifically
Yeah,
on
I'm with
any
you.
of that. So
Hmm.
the story they told, I just needed them to tell well. And like I said, it's been a mixed bag in terms of how they've been able to convey that. And uh, they've lived and died by their own pen with the writing, and I think that that's where it comes in terms of a lot of the things that you've mentioned. And I was talking to someone the other day about how I felt about the series, and for me, it really comes down to um, how are how well do you tell this story in a way that if I come out of it enjoying it, I can look at the things that I didn't think were done well, but they don't override the level of enjoyment I had at the end of the whole thing. But if I come out of it feeling even slightly down or flat on it, then those things that I didn't like will kind of grow exponentially and make it a bad thing in terms of overall, because then I'll start a thread. You start pulling at it, and then it's
Hmm.
going to all unravel.
Yep.
So I'm thinking that that's why I think this next episode, at least for me, needs to um, be where it was, at least with this one, and getting solid explanations, getting things that will wrap up this story in a satisfying way. This story, not the story that maybe it could have been, but whatever they've already presented us. If they can do it in a satisfying way, I think I'll be okay. I even at that, I will still always know that the show had more potential. It could have been a lot more than what we
Oh
we
yeah.
did get. But
Yeah.
what we did get, if it comes to a conclusion in a way that I feel like, okay, they told this story that they wanted to tell, and I feel like they stuck that landing, I'll come out of it and being like, okay, it was definitely better than Boba Fett, and maybe in between Boba Fett and Mandalorian or something like that, basically.
Yeah. Somebody asked me that today. Like, oh, at least it's better than Boba Fett, and I
Mm,
hesitated, and I'm like, is it? I'm like,
mm,
yeah, it is. I mean, am I enjoying seeing Vader on screen? Absolutely. Like, do I enjoy seeing Obi-Wan on screen? Absolutely. Even if I wish the show, I don't think the show does a good enough job of making it really a show about Obi-Wan. Like, it doesn't, in a lot of ways, it
right,
doesn't feel that much about him. Even if the overall story seems to be hunting down Obi-Wan Kenobi.
right.
But I think you know what I mean by that. Um,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
honestly, if for me, if it was to feel more like an Obi-Wan story, I think he would have needed um, someone to bounce his thoughts off of more. Specifically in the way I'm thinking about it would probably be Force Ghost Qui-Gon Jinn, in
Right.
order for him to talk about these things that how he failed Anakin, how both of them kind of have failed Anakin, and the different things, and get what's going on in his mind. And we don't get any of that really. He doesn't have someone sort of his peer that he can talk to, and so all we get is a lot of looks of anguish and regret and sadness, but no actual dialogue in terms of being able to express that really. I mean, you
Yeah.
get some of it where he talks to what's her name, Talia or whatever, but
Talia. I think
it's
it's
yeah,
Talia. Yeah.
but little, very little, and he's still guarded with that. He's not going to come out like he would if it was Qui-Gon or someone else.
Speaking of that, like that's one thing I was thinking about today too. And I mean, I'm gonna obviously withhold full judgment on the way it handles the character of Obi-Wan until after Episode 6.
Mm,
But I mean, so far as I watch this, there's obviously, and we knew this going into it, that this show is showing, kind of focusing a lot on the weight that Obi-Wan feels for having failed his Padawan, but not only that, like feeling responsible that now his Padawan has become a Sith Lord, Darth Vader, and again, I'm gonna go to Episode 4, New Hope, and I think about that Obi-Wan,
mm,
and I don't. When I think about that Obi-Wan, I don't think that he is he's not feeling that strongly about how he brought up helped train Anakin. I feel like something would need to happen in Episode 6 that at least helps like send us in the direction of the Obi-Wan we know in Episode 4. And I feel like as the trajectory we're going on right now, it's almost like an Obi-Wan that is more fraught even 5 episodes in than the Obi-Wan we know in that movie. Does that make sense?
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And and in a lot of ways I feel like it's doing a disservice for the character that I love.
Mm,
Like, yeah, obviously I get that, he should there's emotional baggage and problems for him. The fact that this was his Padawan that turned into Darth Vader, but I think the coming out of this show, like let's say this were the final episode and there was no episode 6,
Yeah.
like I would be like, man, like now I feel like he's like just a terrible Jedi that
Sure.
screwed up and and didn't see all the signs and is half responsible for
Again.
the fact
Again.
that right. So it's I don't know. Like I in a way as it stands, I feel like the show is actively making Obi-Wan a less desirable Star Wars character, almost like kind of like what Boba Fett, the book of Boba Fett did for Boba Fett,
Right.
you know. And I hope episode 6 helps reverse that course.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will, but I really hope it does.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. I think that um that puts a lot of weight on the episode 6 in terms of
Yeah.
storytelling and the time that they give. I think I was listening to a podcast today, and they said that it was rumored that the 6th episode is supposed to be an hour and a half. Um, I don't. I'm curious as to how that gets told in a way that doesn't feel rushed in terms of getting Obi-Wan to that place where he would need to be. I'm not
Mm.
saying they can't do it, but I'm just I would I am dying to see how they can do it. Um, I really feel like you would think that in some ways that there was supposed to be maybe a second season because it would give him chance to get to that point organically
Mm-hmm.
because like you said, and for all the things and reasons you pointed out, he's really kind of just taking L's all over the place in this series. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of like, well, how does he ever get to that point that we know him from in episode 4? And so to me, it would seem like within a second season, that's when that transition starts to happen. Maybe he does start communing with Qui Gon at the end of this, and then through more communing with Qui Gon and just other trials and tribulations that might happen, that gets him to that point. But um, I can't see the vision for it in the final episode for just this one season that we're supposed to get. So I'm not saying it can't be done. I just I can't envision it based on what we have and how much runway we have left. So
Right.
we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see. I mean, if I don't know where the rumor is coming from that it could be an hour and a half, I hope it is.
Yeah.
um, I say that as someone who's thinking I'll actually wake up and watch it before I go to work next week.
Mm,
Even I'm talking about a show that I'm at this point, I can now say I'm not particularly enjoying,
hmm.
but I'm still a Star Wars fan, and of course I'm dying to see the final episode.
All right.
Um, yeah, no, an hour and a half would be nice. What did so, when we talked about episodes 1 through 3, I said, and I even said no, but I don't see this as happening. The whole Riva
Mm,
situation. I said, I was like, hey, like, is it possible that she's just playing this game to get close to Vader because she's upset with him for killing,
right.
all these younglings? And then I immediately was like, no, I don't see that would be the case, though, because, I mean, she's hurting other people. She's been an Inquisitor all this time. Like, it doesn't seem like it plays. And then sure enough, we find out is basically what's happening.
Hmm.
Now, I mean, I definitely, though, agree that, as someone who is out for revenge and is led by her anger and is basically through that probably following it's a path to the dark side. I could see that that's why she is, been doing the things she's been doing to get to Vader and still being
Right.
the kind of anger filled, hateful person that she is. But there was still something about that reveal and the way she then kind of talks with Obi-Wan and it's still, I don't know. It just it feels like, again, the show with more time. I think I wish it had done a better job of developing that character and how she got to this point. And it just, I don't know, it didn't feel earned.
Mm.
There's something about that reveal that
Which
kind of bugged
part?
me.
Just
Just
the idea
just the
that she's
fact
been.
that she is actually, yep, I am just seeking revenge because it was so dramatic to see him kill, all of my friends, and I guess a path of revenge has led her down the road that she's been down. But I don't know, something didn't quite add up for
Hmm.
me. It felt, it didn't feel, something about it didn't feel right. So
That's
I
interesting.
I I get the impression you're not on the same page as me on
I
that.
mean, I guess not only just because to me that seemed obvious from when they first showed her as a youngling in the very first part of the first episode. To me,
Mm-hmm.
that seemed to be the only thing that made sense. That she was uh, well, I won't say it was the only thing that made sense. Obviously, there could have been most anger directed towards Obi-Wan because, as she mentioned, she felt like, where was he? Felt abandoned by Obi-Wan, knowing that he's alive and he never came to help or did anything or came looking for any other of them. So that was one avenue, but then I could not just let that be. There's no way I would have just thought that if she was thinking that way, then Anakin would be off the hook. If she already knew Anakin and was Darth Vader, then there's no way that she doesn't also blame him as well. So I figured that there's got to be a turn at some point where um, she wants to not only destroy Obi-Wan but also Vader. And I think that um, to me, like you said, all the different things she's used that fueled by the anger and revenge to get to this point, um, I think she's only revealing herself to be who she is at this point. I don't see in my eyes, even if they try and do it, I don't see a redemption arc for her. Um,
No, no.
I think they love to do that. You know, Vader, as many times as they show him um, killing younglings and the different things that he's done, even just within this series, you still get Return of the Jedi, and he has a tender moment with his son, and now he gets to be a Force ghost. I mean, you know, a lot of people buy into that. Um, Kylo Ren does kills his dad and does all kinds of heinous things, and
Right.
he does a turn or he has a love story, and people seem to say, "Oh, he's okay now."
He's a good guy.
I don't agree with that. You know,
Fair
so
enough.
I
Fair
I
enough.
I don't think that she can do anything as well that would say, um, okay, now you deserve to be remembered in the hollows of Jedi or whatever the case may be. You know,
Right. Right.
I don't think you deserve that by doing something in the final act. You know, there's plenty of people like Talia. I will give you as an example, realized that she was serving the wrong side based on the things that she saw the empire do and decided to devote her life to helping. And then she's helped so many people. You see the many people she's helped. And when she dies, I do think she's redeemed because she saw the error of her ways and didn't just have one final act of goodness. She's been doing this for
Mm-hmm.
years or however long at this point, and she's shown that she's seen what it is and knows the terrible things that she's had to be a part of, and has legitimately tried to be a better person out of just being a better person, not because, oh, this is my son and now he's going to make me good, or this is this girl that I like and she's going to make me be. It's a
Right.
pure motive to it. So I think that with Riva, um there's nothing that can be redeemed in that, even though if she makes some sort of grand gesture or sacrifice, um that doesn't excuse anything else she's done to get to this point for her revenge. And just along those lines, I where I think the writing didn't serve itself well in this particular episode is that um I the moment in which she chooses the strikes just seems so uh ill advised.
Yeah.
It just did not make any kind of sense to me whatsoever.
No.
And so I was like, "You've been waiting all this time for that moment?
For
Really?
that was the moment. Yeah.
That's not a good moment. Get him when he's
No.
distracted in some other way.
Yeah. Instead
Maybe
of
when
just
he's
standing
pulling down,
there,
yeah, maybe when he's using his abilities to try to pull down the ship,
that's
he's a
when you
little
do it.
distracted. Yeah, you do it then. That's
When
not
he's
when he's
using
got
all of
away.
his force power to pull
Yeah,
down a ship, that would have been the perfect moment.
right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely don't think that that there's redemption there, but in what you were saying that uh something about it doesn't sit right with you or doesn't gel specifically. I don't quite feel that way, but yeah, I do feel that in the end, no matter what, I think that she she isn't, as a character and writing aside, she just isn't thinking clearly as much as we've seen her actually be very smart in the series. Uh, the anger, and I guess in some ways it also plays within the series when um, Obi-Wan is talking to Anakin and talking about his level of vengeance and how it blinds him and anger. And I guess in a way it applies to Riva as well, that she's doing stupid things because she's just let that take over and poison her life, that need for revenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I was going to ask you something, and of course now I'm drawing a blank. um, uh, yeah, no, you mentioned the music earlier. I was gonna say, like, I
Mm,
know I've heard the same thing about like, oh, I wish themes had been used, and I mean, even though I wouldn't have a problem with that, I don't, in a way, don't I don't disagree with that sentiment. At the same time, it hasn't been bothering me. With
mm,
that said, I do feel like there's been moments where I'm like, I don't particularly like the music
mm.
here or the way the music is. I don't think it's the best. Like I don't think it's been the best score for a Star Wars show so far. Um, I will say that briefly.
It's
Um,
it's weird to me. I was thinking about this because, like you said, you heard it somewhere, and I did as well.
hmm
And it's just one of those things where I started to sort of think about it a little bit in terms of how music affects me uh, when I'm watching something, and it's obviously at this point hindsight and harder to remember in the moment. But I gotta say, I almost say I almost want to say it's fairly rare in my case that I think I can really sit down and say the first time I heard something, it just stuck with me. And it was something that I was remembering. There are cases for sure, but I think the majority of the time, certain things don't necessarily stick with me as noticing them one way or the other. The way it does stick with me is because I've watched that thing 30 times or however many times, and that now
Right.
it's become ingrained in me. And
Right.
so I think that's sort of how music comes with me when it comes to things that I'm watching. Sometimes it's very much a noticeable thing because it's different in a way that I haven't heard. But and we've talked about this before within just general movies that we've reviewed, that a lot of times that music is just sort of not white noise, but I don't necessarily notice it when it's there. And so I don't know if it's not effective or if it's not good or if it's not bad. It's just I can only sometimes hear it because I'm so not focused on it at all. It's one of those things that someone would have to point it out, and I go back and listen to it for it to be effective a lot of times.
Yeah, and to be clear, I think that's perfectly normal and correct. That if music's doing its job in a show, I mean, in a way, it shouldn't stand out in a way that you're like, oh wow, that's such nice music while I'm watching this movie or show. Like,
Hmm.
it should just kind of support the scene and that be it. With that said, I mean, there was times in this show that I felt like it did stick out to me because I don't think I liked it.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, of course, as a musician, do I make a point to listen to it? Maybe to go out of my way to kind of pay attention to it at times. Sure, but I think generally speaking, I don't think I would. I think it's more common that most people don't think about the music
Hmm.
because it's just kind of a part of the overall way the story is being told. It's not supposed to really stick out, um,
Yeah.
in my opinion. But for what it's worth.
Hmm.
But yeah, I just thought of that. That I don't know. There was like I think there was a point. I was rewatching some scenes from the show before we recorded, and
Hmm.
like I remember this a scene of like Darth Vader like arriving on the planet and walking up to be like, okay, where is he? Like the music there was just like, this isn't great.
Hmm.
But I mean, there's a lot about this. Another thing that comes to mind, Kumail Nanjiani's character, whatever his name is just a character. I'm like, I like him as an actor. I think he's fantastic. Him in the show, just it doesn't work for me. It takes me out of it immediately
Hmm.
when I see him. His character just doesn't work. Like stuff like that bugged me. Um, I mean, I guess I could have probably made a nice long list of the just nitpicky things. I mean, I didn't really notice. I remember as we were watching, Michelle pointed out like the droid that she has.
Hmm.
That
Lola.
Riva puts like a tracker on, but it's not just a tracker. It's like it kind of takes control of it. You
Yeah.
know, and there's that scene where it leaves the bag and it's hunting around for like a way to close the door so the ship can't get out.
Hmm.
And I mean, I don't know. I didn't even really notice it. Michelle pointed out. It looked like it was able to open like a door with no hands or anything. It just opened. And she was like, "How did it do that?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I guess I didn't think about it." But I know it's something she bumped on. I know she's not here to talk about it herself. But did you even notice that when it happened? Or
No, I didn't. I think I watched one of the review shows or something on YouTube, and I think someone mentioned in passing something about
right?
that. And so I guess it's one of those things where I didn't notice it, so I didn't bump up on it against it because I didn't notice it. Um, but I always find when stuff like that happens in shows, there's just enough there that you can start to do mental gymnastics where you start to fill in gaps and like write logic for things that don't quite make sense or aren't explained.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those things could be, I don't know. I can't even remember that part of it, but I don't know if it was one of those things where we see in Star Wars a lot of times where some doors are just automatic when you come up close to them, they open, or if it was one of those things where um, there's a lot of droids, R2 being one of them, can talk to other machines or things or whatever and get them to do things that like open doors or whatever like that.
Yeah, I don't
But this
know.
being
I
but this being a door, you wouldn't talk to it in that sense. But um, again, it's like that's what you start to do sometimes to forgive writing when it's not apparent what's going on there specifically, and that you start to
right.
fill in the gaps yourself. But yeah, I could see how that could be something you'd bump up against if it's so obvious. And even though I missed it, but it sounds
Yeah,
like it was
I mean,
pretty obvious.
I did too. I meant to
Yeah.
rewatch that scene before we recorded, and I forgot to rewatch that one because I was kind of curious about it. But
Mm.
yeah, I think it was just like a little flap or something to like to get into that like
Oh.
I don't know. It almost looked like a shaft or something it had to
Hmm.
get into. Like, if something like that. Anyway, that's a minor, stupid, like, kind of nitpicky thing.
Hmm.
I mean, it did seem like, again, I mean, and that's kind of like what you're saying. There's convenient devices, like the fact that you're able to just stick this thing on this little droid. And not only is it just a tracker, but it, like, kind of took control of this little droid. I guess in one sense, I'm like, it's such a basic droid that maybe
Hmm.
that's why, because it's so small. But
Yeah.
it did seem a little much. Like, I don't know. Like, again, that's not something I bumped on too much. I mean, of all the problems I do have with this show, stuff like that, I've heard complaints about that, and that's not one that I'm like bothers me
Yeah.
that much. That they kind of were
Same.
able to like control this little flying toy droid, if you will.
Right. Lola.
Lola. Sorry, I'll call it Lola from now
I'm sure though you'll see some people with that toy at some point. So
on. Oh,
might as well know
I
her name.
I pre-ordered the Hasbro.
Did you?
But yeah, I don't know if you've seen that. It looks pretty
Uh,
cool.
I think I did. I think I
I
did.
think they revealed it at Celebration. We didn't see it. I don't think it was in
Oh,
the. I don't think it was in the Hasbro booth when we walked through.
yeah.
But I've seen video of them like at that booth at Celebration, like revealing it. And
Okay.
yeah, it's like a pre-order item right now, and it's
Uh,
like it's animatronic. It moves around. I'm like, that thing's pretty sweet.
does it fly
So
like a drone, or is
I
it
don't think
just
if no, it doesn't do that.
okay? That would be
No,
kind
it
of cool.
doesn't fly. That would be pretty sweet, but no, it doesn't go that far.
Okay.
I think it'll be a good Christmas gift for somebody, one of my kids.
Yeah.
So, so I think it's due to come out like right before Christmas or something like that. But
Oh,
anyway,
they know what they're doing.
yeah, exactly. Sure they do. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much else. I don't know if you have any other things you want to touch on with this episode, but
uh, well, I was trying to think. I saw okay. As we're talking about things people bumped up against, completely valid. I'll give them this is completely valid thing to bump up against. I just personally didn't really bump up against it that much, other than yeah, I could see that. That's a nitpick. Not a nitpick, but that's something that for me I could say would be a nitpick, but for others why it might be a big deal. And that was uh they didn't de-age Anakin or Hayden Christensen in that scene with Obi-Wan in the beginning or throughout
did they not
this
at all? You don't think?
maybe they smoothed out some wrinkles,
I think they
but
did,
but
but
but he definitely doesn't look like Padawan
oh no, absolutely not.
Anakin
You're right.
in that way that they could have probably gone with. I mean, if you can make Luke Skywalker, who at his age now look like as close to he possibly probably could after Return of the Jedi, I'm
Right.
sure they could have done a better job
Oh,
with
they
how.
totally could have.
But
And
again, I didn't bump up against it, but I did see a lot of people complaining.
to agree, I didn't bump on that either. Like
Yeah,
that was fine. In fact, I'm totally cool with that.
yeah.
I mean, as soon as he turns around, I there was a second of is that just heavy makeup on him
Mm,
or did they do a very slight de-age but they didn't want to overdo it because even as he moves around there are times where I felt like his face there was moments of like an unnatural look to his face and maybe it was just me overthinking it or
mhm,
something I don't know or it was just the Coruscant background
mm.
but there was a part of me that's like I feel like they did a little something to it just not
I'm sure
much
they
but
did a
and
little.
it could have just been practical makeup like
Yeah.
which I'm obviously he's got makeup on they all do but yeah maybe it was just that made him look a little bit not perfect but
Yeah.
yeah I had no problem with the fact that they didn't like completely de-age him to young Anakin I'm in fact kind of glad they didn't because I mean so far they've had some success with it and other times it's not been that great so I'll err on the side of you know what even at his age Hayden Christensen looks great just throw some makeup on him he's fine we don't have
Yeah.
to like de-age him What
Yeah.
did you think? I've heard the complaint about Coruscant and the fact that like the Coruscant that we see in this compared to the Coruscant we saw in that same era, like there's just things flying around everywhere.
Hmm.
And the shots of Coruscant here, there is really like no activity. It just looks like structures, and
Right.
that's it.
I, I
Like,
I know what you're talking about in the scene in the moment. I did not even notice it. I didn't. I saw that it was Coruscant, obviously, but I was focused on Hayden and Obi-Wan and Anakin at that moment, so that I wasn't even really thinking
thinking
about
about little
how
nitpicky details.
yeah, how unpopulated it seemed. I mean, again, mental gymnastics. If I wanted to, I could just say, hey, they're Jedi. They probably get up at the same time Marines get up at like 4 or 5 in the morning, and so there's probably not that much traffic going on of course
Right.
at that hour.
It
But
didn't seem like much of a sunrise, I think.
no, but
No.
again, it's like that's that would, for me, would be a
Yeah.
nitpick.
I'll admit, I thought about it right at that first shot. I was like, oh, Coruscant. Oh, it seems quiet. Like,
Mhm.
it just, it's a split second thought. And then, yeah, then from that point on, it was like, oh, it's Anakin. And
Yeah.
this is what we're doing. Cool. Um, yeah. No, I thought about it, but it's not like it bugs me. It's just kind of a
No,
silly thing.
no. Again, I think it kind of points to that idea that if how much you're enjoying the show, or is going to be how much you pick up on certain things,
Oh, absolutely.
and and so I
And I
think that
mean, I guess I'm finding that I'm having enough issues with it that a lot of things, even more so, are starting to stick out. Like,
yeah.
you know, I watched I watched the final episode. I won't talk about it because I don't want to spoil anything. But I watched the final episode of a show that I've been watching today, and or at least the final episode of the season, I guess.
Hmm.
And that's a show that I thought was great. And was there was one thing in that final episode that I was like, I'm bumping up on this. I'm bumping against this. Like
Hmm.
this is okay. But at the same time, I didn't care because I'm like, this is such a good show. Like this stupid little thing. I mean, it's an example I can't really explain because I don't want to talk about it. But you know, that's an example of like, yeah, okay, I'm bumping on this small little bit of plot here. Not really, but anyway. But the show is so good that so I don't
Hmm.
care right now. It
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
But this show has not been that way for me so far. So
That's unfortunate too.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, One thing I think that I worry about when I watch this show, I've talked about it before, is a lot of times on YouTube, after some of these shows that we watch, the genre shows, I'll go and look at reaction videos or
Mm-hmm.
reviews and stuff and see what's going on and how other people are accepting it, or what their gripes are, whatever the case may be. One thing that I'm noticing is something I kind of pointed to when I talked about the episode, is that for me it was satisfying from a character standpoint, but for other people I think it was more satisfying from, like, oh, you see Vader like ripping things up and you know going Vader. And I found that a lot of times when I watch these reviews or reactions, the biggest pop comes from when they show Anakin and Obi-Wan training in Coruscant, when you see Vader doing his thing
Mm-hmm.
on Boba Fett, when Mandalorian shows up and Luke shows up, and on Mandalorian when Luke shows up at the end, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like it makes me worried and a little sad that how hard people are holding on to the Skywalker stuff in terms of
Yeah.
how much they enjoy their Star Wars. It's almost like it's a crutch to a certain degree, that
Yeah.
if we don't get that, they're not getting their fix, their shot. And so it's everything beyond that isn't doing it for them, or
Yeah.
lackluster in some sort of way. And so I really hope and have my fingers crossed that with whatever Taika does and whatever Kevin Feige does, if they get to do it, them going on record saying that it has nothing to do with anything that we know from Skywalker stuff and looks to expand the universe, that
Yeah,
people accept that and aren't looking for someone to pop up in it, and just let it
absolutely,
be what it
man.
is.
Could not agree with you more. Like, it does feel like up to this point, the Disney era of Star Wars is just about reacting and placating to a certain aspect of Star Wars fandom, or what they feel like is all of Star Wars fandom,
Mm,
that is like reacting, like you're saying, to those aspects of these shows, like the nostalgia stuff, right?
hmm
Like episode 4 of this show feels like, oh man, what will Star Wars fans want to see? They want to see Obi-Wan like doing his thing like he kind of did in the Death Star, but the Death here it'll be the Fortress Inquisitorius, whatever it's called,
hmm
and him running around and finding Leia, who's about to be tortured again, just like she was in Episode 4. It's so reminiscent. It'll be so great. Like
mm.
stuff like it just feels like stop. Please stop making stuff just because you think that's what we want. Just tell good stories. It doesn't have to involve like people we know. Just expand the universe. Yeah, expand the universe. Like I saw the same stuff that Taika said about his movie, and I'm like, oh god, that sounds fantastic. Like, please.
Yeah, yeah,
Hey, I love seeing when I saw Luke at the end of that season of, Mandalorian, I was as happy as anybody else. Don't get me wrong.
yeah,
Like it was
absolutely.
great. But I am with you, man. I just want to see new stuff. I want to see Star Wars doing different things. Not to go down a rabbit hole of talking about the Disney trilogy of films, but sure, in hindsight, I look at those 3 movies and I go, yeah, Last Jedi, that was a pretty damn good movie. At least it tried to do something different.
Hmm.
At least, even though I hate the development of it compared to what Force Awakens tried to set up, that I do hate about. Hate maybe is kind of strong, but dislike about that movie. But
hmm
standing on its own, at least that movie was doing its own thing, something new. I applaud that. I hope we get more of that soon. So, yeah, I'm with you, man.
Yeah.
With that, I think that's going to do it. I think we're going to wrap it up. Yeah, one more episode to go. Episode 6 coming next week.
Hmm.
I still got to watch Miss Marvel episode 2. I haven't watched that yet.
So good.
Yeah.
I love that show.
Yeah.
I described it to someone at work today. That said, the word that keeps coming up in my mind for anytime I think about the show is delightful. It
Yeah.
just it's
I
it's
mean,
just a delightful show.
I've definitely felt that way about the first episode, and I
Yeah.
have a feeling the second episode's not going to disappoint. So I'm looking forward to it. It's just been busy, but yeah. With that, we would love to hear back from everyone watching. Let us know what you thought of these episodes of Obi-Wan Kenobi. We'd like to hear from you. You can leave comments and questions down below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us reach more viewers. Hit that bell icon to be notified whenever we post any videos or go live in the future. And you can also, by the way, find us on Instagram and Twitter at Flickr_effect. With that, I'm David Lott.
I'm Bobby Jackson.
Thanks for watching.